Yeah,
Yes.
See,
that's
I
one.
don't recognize them, so I need to be
Well, why would
told.
you? You weren't alive when they.
You weren't old enough.
I think I was alive. Jeez, Steve, not that young.
But there's a strict definition of alive, Tina. It doesn't include being on drugs.
I am getting
No,
sick
I
and
wasn't.
tired.
No.
my-
I was just young. And what year are we referencing for
You got to start out young if you're going to stick it out.
Oh,
By the way, we're live on
another
LinkedIn.
one?
I hope not.
Yes, that was another one. Absolutely.
Yeah,
100%.
minus the imitation.
You got to start out young if you're going to stick it out.
Nikki. 70s.
Very good.
Okay, we're actually live streaming right now. So
And now we're gonna.
we're about to start the Gillmor game.
All of the fire sign references are in the past.
We're done.
I can't realize I need to clean my glasses. There's clouds in front of my screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, I think that's just your perspective.
I just
Is this better for you, Steve, what you're seeing here right now?
Yeah, it's definitely
I
better.
had to do that myself
All right.
a minute ago.
I think Frank has done that make me look better filter on because he's looking like 10 years younger.
It's the
Well-
light.
Frank, are you ready for your close-up now?
Now you have to be
Now say
on the stair-
Rosebud.
on the staircase. No, it's not. It's Sunset Boulevard is the reference.
I know, but
Yes.
it looked more like Rosebud when he was coming close. Like
I'm not
that.
going.
No.
I'm not. That Gloria Swanson looked scared the hell out
So
of me.
you're
That was a crazy.
even though
rock,
you're not sharp, you're pretty sharp.
was the Rosebud a crane shot
Sure.
that started?
I think it was a trombone. Yeah, the trombone is when you dolly in and pull out at the same time, so it makes the perspective. So the background stays. It's called a trombone. Thank you.
Do they have that on the iPhone yet?
Screen shine.
You know, you can do that with
From
the new
Amazon.
iPhone, actually.
You
I
can,
think
yeah.
we should start the show. Okay.
Yeah.
We've been streaming
Quiet,
for like the
please.
last
Chit chat.
Quiet,
Quiet,
please.
please.
At the beginning.
Quiet on the set. Did you see my
Quiet,
my
please.
coat my hanger?
Quiet,
Uh-oh.
please. Yes, we did.
Yeah.
It was
Hanger.
excellent.
Okay, here we go. Mute is off. And we're gonna go
Wow, look at that.
in 3, 2, 1, and wait, don't do that. You're not on. Okay.
Oh, I wanted that. I was going to make a joke about. Could you give me a
Okay.
tank full?
Thanks.
Well,
Thanks for the memories.
Thanks.
all right, here we go. Mute is off, and we're gonna go in 3, 2, 1, and
That was a little fast, but
okay.
coming out of the dissolve, and here I am. Hi, I'm Steve Gillmor, and this is the Gillmor Gang. This is a special, not Thursday, not Friday, almost not today edition of the show. Yes, and want to say best wishes to Michael Markman, who's
Who was going to be here?
yes, but had to bail at the last second, and we're hoping to see him again next time. Welcome to from the state of Atlanta, Georgia, is Brent Leary. Welcome, Brent.
I'm lethargic.
Nice to meet you. And
And that's the Moderna talking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
so we're all properly boosted, which is congratulations to all of us. Correct?
Correct.
Yeah, the guy in the lower right-hand corner on my screen is in Palo Alto. It's Keith Tier.
Pleasure to be here. I was lethargic 2 weeks ago, but now I'm cathartic.
Ah.
What that means. There's probably another word I could think of as well. Come on, help me, Frank.
Catastrophic.
Oh, well, that's just, that's constant.
Got it.
But we'll get to that
Catatonic.
in a bit. I'm
Okay.
looking forward.
Categoric.
I'm looking
Catatonic.
forward to hearing from Keith about the wonderful Web3 evolution.
Great experiment, wonderful experiment.
Brent, didn't you have something to say about that in the most recent t.me/Gillmor gang?
I don't know because I was pretty lethargic.
Oh.
Well, at least you're getting laughs.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They always say lethargic humor is the best humor.
Who's they?
Well, you know, them.
Wasn't that Stephen Wright's gig?
Did I ever tell you the story about Stephen Wright?
No, tell us.
Well, he used to live when we had an apartment on 90th Street in Manhattan. He lived on the same block, so I would run into him occasionally. And he once told me, I did a series of interviews with a lot of those guys back in whenever that was. And he once told me
1930s.
Yeah.
what we consider to be Stephen Wright's act, namely that he's what's the word? Lethargic. Yeah.
And Stephen Wright has a very slow.
It's
delivery
laconic
and-
mixed with a sense of foreboding, and it's pretty amazing stuff. And he basically told me that this isn't an act. It's just how he is. He discovered that the audiences thought it was funny, so he kept going. That's the story.
That's a great story.
I want to tell my Manhattan street story, which is in 1996. I lived in First Avenue on 14th Street in an apartment that stretched an entire block. The apartment was owned by Larry Rivers, who was a Beat era artist. I rented it for work, and my upstairs neighbor, we had a shared elevator, was Allen Ginsberg. And Allen Ginsberg would play jazz music till 5 a.m. every day, right above my bedroom. And then when I was getting up and emptying my garbage, he would come down in the elevator in a tux with his garbage. And that's the only time I ever met him was in the elevator in a tux, bringing his garbage down. He kind of dressed up to bring the garbage down.
Johnny's in the basement.
Ambition is a poor excuse for not having enough sense to be lazy.
Who said that?
Stephen Wright.
Oh.
Yeah. A lot of people are afraid of heights. I'm afraid of widths.
Why is that? Now, why is that funny?
He thinks that this is like an improv that is going to extend well beyond the introductions of the other people.
I have a quick question, though.
Change is inevitable except for vending machines.
Dennis, have you ever lived in New York?
No, I have not.
I was just getting ready. I had this strange feeling that I might be the only one here that has never lived in New York the way these stories are coming out. But okay.
Well, I was born in New York, so that qualifies.
So yes, you've lived in New York.
I was born in DC, but I ended up in New York. So
I was thinking about Yogi Berra this week and his famous saying that nobody goes there anymore because it's too crowded. Kind of applies.
I just saw that quote somewhere this week. Was it in the New York Times?
I don't know.
I love that quote.
If it was.
Yeah, that's a great quote.
So just picking up a couple of the pieces here on the guy referred to as Dennis is Dennis Pombriant. Welcome, Dennis.
Hi, Steve. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here on a wonderful Sunday.
And we've met Keith Tier several times. Let's see. I think that's it. Oh, Frank Radis. Welcome, Frank.
Hola, ¿cómo estás? ¿Qué estás haciendo?
All right.
Mucho bien, gracias.
Will that get you a beer in a war zone?
Sure will. Actually, it used to be La Cuenta, mi amigo.
La cuenta.
What does that
Por
mean?
favor.
How much
It
do I
means
need to pay you?
No, give the bill to my friend. That was my favorite one.
Erwin Corey used to say that, borrow from your friends. And if they haven't got any money, make new friends, but keep borrowing.
That's funny that you say that, because Stephen Wright said borrow money from pessimists. They don't expect to get it back.
The rule when I was in college is you can borrow anything from a friend, but there's two things you can never borrow from friends: books and girlfriends.
You know what? I actually think that I would add cameras and guitars to that.
Or maybe even reverse the list so that the
Cameras and guitar. Yeah, maybe guitars, cameras, books, girlfriends, in that order.
And rounding out the gang is our producer and director, Tina Chase Gillmor. Welcome.
Okay. Oh, hi. So that
Pelosi clap.
see, because I don't have this. Hi. Okay. That's long enough for my
Yeah.
okay. There
I
we go.
like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Her.
Alrighty then.
Okay.
Righty then.
So let me see. What do we want to talk about? Let's start with Musk. Anybody?
Oh.
I
Brent.
I predicted he was not going to close the deal, and I'm now doubling down on that.
Oh.
Okay.
You mean not at all? Won't close it at all?
Now he voted that it won't close by October.
October.
You and I were the only people that said it would.
But now I'm asking a different question, which is that he won't buy Twitter at all.
I think there's a more than even chance he won't buy it at all now, because not necessarily because of his lack of desire, but so much has changed in the context that he'd be a fool to buy it for the price he offered anyway.
That's what the former guy said.
Yeah, but won't it cost him $1 billion to walk away?
That's cheap compared to 44 billion.
Well, yeah.
But cheap for what?
Got it.
I mean, why was he doing it in the first place? If that's cheap,
Well,
I'll take that billion and I'll spend it on something
I'm
else.
sure
I mean,
Twitter-
come on.
so if you look at his life in the last 2 weeks, what happened? He said he was going to buy it. They ended up agreeing. He then went and sold about $12 billion worth of Tesla stock, which was not going to become liquid before that. That's now sitting in his bank account.
Mhm.
The market has crashed at least 25% since he asked, at least, probably more in the case of tech. And he's managed to get all these banks to give him leverage based on Tesla stock, which is down to $800. It was at $1,100. So every single metric that's related to this deal has gone in a bad direction, except for the price he's offered to pay for Twitter, which has stayed constant. That can't.
So he started the market crash. Is that what you're telling me? That's
No,
related to it?
he's an unintended victim of timing.
Yeah, he's the recipient.
And
Well,
Twitter are too.
We're
Twitter,
all unintended victims of timing. That would
yeah, they all are. So there's no way
we all are. Everybody.
everybody is, but there's no way he can hold the price constant when everything else has declined. That would be stupid.
Well, he's not stupid, evidently.
Yeah. He
So
made the
you're
deal.
you're voting. It sounds to me like you're voting the way I did, which is that by October, this deal will clear.
I'm saying it won't, because I think the Twitter board will be head in the sand trying to ignore the reality that they need to sell for a lower price.
So
I think you're right. I agree.
Okay, so you've switched from being suggesting that it won't close in October to it won't close in October. So you haven't
Yes.
changed your mind. Okay,
I'd
great.
like to ask a question though.
Mm.
So if at this point, if he starts renegotiating the price, they already had a contract, if you will, right? They already
Yeah,
have
yeah.
an agreement. So if he tries to renegotiate that, he's trying to undo that agreement. They don't have to agree to a lower price.
Not at all.
No, there's a penalty of $1 billion if he doesn't complete.
And
But if he does complete, the penalty is about $12 billion.
wouldn't
Yeah.
Wouldn't Twitter kind of like, though, maybe to be Twitter without
In this
Trump
position?
and get the billion?
Twitter will get the billion, but a billion doesn't go very far in the life of Twitter.
Well, that's your opinion, right?
Well, it's just the
No,
financial.
no, no. It's your opinion that they'll get the billion.
Oh, I'm assuming that he has to pay the penalty. But
Okay, good.
right, I don't know that.
Okay, I say no. That's not going to happen.
That he won't pay the penalty.
No,
I think there's
he's
a back door.
negotiating and he's making a deal, and everybody's going to go along with it.
So he's going to get the price lowered, and they're still going to.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that they can do is to change the terms of the buyout, so that billion will probably go away.
Do you
Yeah,
think
but that involves the Twitter board and management team.
Yes, who are in such powerful positions that they can afford to dictate anything.
they don't have a lot of leverage, right?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Do you think that his saying that he would reinstate Trump has any bearing?
Oh, I think it's Trump's fault, the whole thing.
I think that's a sideshow narrative that is not core to the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we're
Yeah.
calling him not the former guy now. We're actually back to calling him Trump.
Only Tina,
No,
only Tina
he's
did.
he's the former guy to me.
Aren't
He'll always be the former guy to me.
I'm gonna reduce that down to FG. We'll call him FG.
That's even less than TFG.
That sounds like a
Actually,
comic book hero.
I'll use
Next
a
time-
different F,
TFG.
but I do like TFG,
TFG.
just not former.
TFG.
Oh,
We can reinterpret the
that former guy.
Yes,
Is that what you're saying? Okay.
No,
just
but
switch
no,
out the former.
but switch out the former for the other F.
See how I did that? Yes, correct.
The other F.
Thank God
Okay.
it's former TGI.
All right. So I think
Well, it's
everybody's holding at their current positions.
Dennis, you are also.
I don't think the deal's gonna go. I don't know what my former position was, but
I think it was that. I think the only people that thought it was going to happen by October were me and her.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
but when I get new data, I make new opinions. I don't think it's gonna go.
At all.
Yeah, I think this is the first or second phase of scuttling the deal. He's letting the world down slowly, and I do think that Orange Julius had a part in it. I think Musk was expecting that the former guy, the once and future thug, would actually come back on board and use his account. But I think there's some resistance there, and without the former guy using his account, I think you sell less Twitter Blue, and Twitter Blue is very important to his business plan.
Yep.
Well, I agree with the
Doesn't he-
analysis, but not the result.
Wasn't he telling his investors that they're going to have 69 million Twitter Blue users by 2024 or something like that?
Precisely.
Yeah, he
don't
might
see
he
that
might have
happening.
more than that. I think that, I think that part of his plan is pretty smart. I mean, essentially,
I don't
it's
think you're going to get it. but-
acquired. Twitter, it gets acquired by Substack is basically that model.
Is Substack that much bigger than Twitter?
No, but Substack is one of the investments of Andreessen Horowitz, and who is supporting the current buyout. So, but it's also a subscription model that Twitter is interested in, or at least
Wait a minute.
Musk is interested.
So Andreessen Horowitz is behind Substack, and what's that other one? Clubhouse. Remember those guys?
Yep. Yeah, they're still
Why don't
around.
they just combine those two and then buy Twitter or something?
Interesting question.
And then call it Clubstack.
Or Smokestack or Pancake.
Cookie Club.
Good. Good.
Okay. Have we exhausted this one?
Mm,
Me think
Like
so.
Yeah.
It's so much more weightier stuff than.
Okay, it's your
Yeah.
shot. Take
here-
it.
Go, Dennis.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Kudos to Ukraine for attacking Russia in a new front, or same front, different dynamics. Russia's pulling out of Kharkiv. It's a beautiful thing. This really highlights the wisdom of the adage: when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. It's amazing. Vladimir Putin cannot stop digging.
Mm.
Is this
Well,
dude sick?
The question is whether, you know, the position that Joe Biden is taking is putting him in a hole that he can't get out of.
Oh, I think we would all love that, but
You don't think it's dangerous?
what aspect is dangerous?
Of putting, you know, a cornered, you know, person into a situation where his only refuge is, you know, whatever.
Well,
don't
You
see
don't
it
want to
that
say
way.
it. You never want to say it.
No, exactly. But
Do you mean
isn't that where he is?
do you mean that we keep, like, we'll just keep giving them weapons, you know, is that what you're talking about?
I'm just saying that
Unlimited supply?
look at it from another perspective for a second and wonder whether or not it makes sense to, you know, when the mama bear is between, or you're between the mama bear and her cubs, that's not a good place for you to be.
Well, I don't think that's the analogy. I think the analogy is that Putin started something pretty big and awful, and he's got to get put back into his box, and it can be done an easy way or a hard way, and you're going to need some cooperation from him. And I think as with any bully, you got to call the bluff, and you got to be ready to put up.
Yeah.
That's the only
No.
thing he's going to respond to.
The other day on t.me/Gillmor gang, which
Where?
t.me/Gillmor gang.
Oh, okay.
I just went there and there are all these articles from Business Insider that are permanently behind a paywall.
Exactly.
I did not put any of them there.
I know you.
I did.
I'm looking at the.
I admit it.
Yes,
I don't have a.
that means you have a subscription to Business Insider, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
You know, all these paywall companies would be really smart to have outside paywall link sharing as
Yeah.
part of their funnel building.
That is the subject of today's show. It's
Yeah.
bundling. No, not kidding.
But it's totally stupid not to be able to share links to a source. From the point of view of the source, is stupid. So, but I was going to say, I posted this thing from another paywall, The Economist.
Wait a minute. We were talking about something else that Dennis was talking about.
No, I was going to relate to that. That's what I'm answering. So the reason I'm related to what Dennis said is this article looked at the impact of social media in the rest of the world on support for Putin. And it made me open my eyes a bit to something I wasn't fully aware of, which is there's a narrative outside of Europe and the US, which is that we are the colonialist stroke imperialists, that NATO represents 200 years of oppression, and that Putin is a savior. And actually, the impact of that I'm with Putin hashtag around the world is actually crazy high. South Africa was the one that got my attention, which I guess isn't that surprising because the ANC and the South African Communist Party are very strong there. But it actually seems to be very widespread. And so if you're in Putin's head, I'm not sure you see yourself as having been backed into a corner as much as building a new alliance against the West.
Fine. It's really not a new alliance. This goes back to Khrushchev in the late 1950s, who Khrushchev's strategy was to promote little wars of liberation around the world, infecting all kinds of countries that were throwing off colonialism and becoming independent nation states. He was successful to a degree. It didn't work, however. I mean, there are just tens and tens of small, poor countries today that threw off the yoke of colonialism, and maybe that was a good thing, but they substituted colonialism for native corruption. So I don't think
That's what my mother-in-law always says in South Africa. Her version of it is black leaders are corrupt. So it's a racist version, but there is this belief that the leadership in post-colonial society is somehow independent of the former history of colonialism, and that you can blame the leaders for what they became. Mugabe is the best example of this. I mean, Mugabe was made in England. Now, he was a bad person for sure and did bad things, but you can't separate that from the history of Rhodesia and Ian Smith and colonialism, because they kind of made each other, if you like.
Well, not only that, but I feel badly for a lot of those South African countries who never really had a chance, because right before liberation or freedom or whatever you want to call it, the owners of the countries in a lot of cases went on a bond spree and crippled the countries. So the countries don't have anything to build up their own infrastructure and their own policies with.
Yeah.
You know.
No, that's entirely true. I mean, most of those leaders, especially in Africa, went to Oxford or Cambridge. Before that, they went to Eton or Harrow. Latterly, they went to American universities and schools. It's a blend. And they were raised to expect to run things with their friends in the West. So the ordinary people, basically became pro-Soviet mostly. And now if you look at the pro-Soviet nationalist movements, they were everywhere. And so this Economist article kind of struck me. I thought that had all gone, but actually this Economist article made me realize it hasn't all gone. It's still there.
The whole hashtag thing flies in the face of what Putin is doing in Ukraine. I don't know how the people around the rest of the world actually square support for Putin with the genocidal war crime and everything else that he's perpetrating on Ukraine. Ukraine was a peaceful country, or even a wealthy country. They exported a ton of grain, and they were an oil producer before all this started.
Well, I'm not an advocate of the point of view, but there is a fairly reasonable narrative on the other side, and that I don't believe is correct and doesn't justify anything that happened. But the narrative is, since the Berlin Wall came down, Western foreign policy that has been geared to turning Russia's neighbors into NATO members and allies, that led to all kinds of outcomes in the region. In the case of Ukraine, led to a pro-Russian government being elected, which was then overthrown in a coup, which the coup was successful and immediately banned both Russian and Hungarian as minority languages and became oppressive. And that Russia, looking at this, kind of stood by the side, and only when the whole NATO thing came up with Ukraine did it act. And therefore Russia is quite genuinely the victim, not the culprit.
So this is the University of Chicago podcast that you
actually, that guy, he's one of them, but I wasn't really
right, but that was what 2 months.
I'm more talking about 3 billion humans who live in the world who think like that.
Well,
according to The Economist.
Thinking like that, for thinking like that to succeed, it requires a couple maybe more rationalizations. Give me an explanation that doesn't count on a rationalization, and I'll tell you which one's real.
Well, to me, it's kind of, I'm sorry I raised it in a way, but I wanted to raise it just because I don't think we're sitting as comfortably as we think we are, which I worry about because I'd like us to be. I think if you analyze what's going on, it's not as clear as we think it is sitting here in the US or the UK. So I just want us to be cognizant of the nuances. That's really my only goal here. And I do think that we probably should look forward as to what is a rational foreign policy that leads to a world that doesn't end up in World War III. That's probably the more interesting conversation.
So what happens
But-
when Finland joins NATO?
Well, Russia's already said that consequences. It's a failed strategy. Growing NATO is stupid because it implies the existence of an enemy that really doesn't want to be an enemy.
Sure looks like one.
Well, it's
Yeah,
but
I was just going to say that, Dennis.
no. I mean, if somebody
walks like a duck.
if somebody pokes me in the chest enough times, I'll eventually hit them. But you could just freeze frame at the point I hit them and I look like the bad guy. But if they've been poking me in the chest for the last 2 hours, I'm not really the bad guy, am I? So NATO is a weaponized alliance to turn Russia into a permanent enemy. That's stupid.
I don't agree. That's not what the NATO charter is all about. And if you look at the other guys before you freeze frame, and you look at the corruption and the failed government of what used to be the Soviet Union, the fact that they're losing 2% of their population a year, the fact that their GDP is smaller than California's by a lot, smaller than Texas's, on and on and on. This is a thugocracy that has not done a damn thing for its people.
But you're making my point. You're making my point. It's a failed society that is not in any realistic way an enemy.
Okay, so let me make my point just by saying I don't really give a rat's ass what the other 3 billion people think about Putin is right or whatever the hashtag is.
Did you see the Henry Kissinger Financial Times interview? It's like half an hour long. I watched it last night on YouTube.
There's another paywalled organization.
No, it was on YouTube, so it's free.
Henry Kissinger's still alive?
He was fantastic.
He is.
He was fantastic.
Wow.
He surveyed the whole history. He surveyed the history from the Nixon-Mao meeting through to the present. He was the most thoughtful person I've heard on the topic, and he echoed a lot of what I just introduced. He wasn't prepared to be that gung-ho, we fight to win guy. He actually tried to understand all the variables in global politics and how it plays out.
The only thing I'd say about winning and losing, I don't really subscribe to the idea of winning and losing in the Ukraine case, except to say that democracies only thrive when they flock. And NATO is a way of ensuring that the flock survives. If Finland and Sweden want to join NATO, so much the better. If anybody wants to join NATO with a legitimate reason, because they are on the European continent, I'm okay with that. I'm okay because I know that it's only the alliance, an alliance of so many countries that can stand up to these huge amalgamations of thugs like Russia, like China, today and deep into the 21st century.
But what if we decide? This is just intuitive on my side, Dennis. But let's assume we demonize the whole thing. So we don't use word like thugs. We don't use any. We don't try to.
Word.
No, but let's just kind of rationally as if it was a board game almost, where we weren't so invested in the outcome, but we were trying to analyze what's going on. And we are invested in the outcome, so it's very hard to do that. I appreciate that. So it does feel to me as if there's a more complex, who do we want America to be is almost as important a question in the context as what do we think Russia is.
Well, I'm not sure what that question has to do with the specifics of this situation, simply because I have seen what Russia did in Ukraine when it controlled parts of Ukraine and subsequently had to leave, like Bucha. Do I want to give a nation like that has that kind of regard for humanity any purchase on world leadership?
But that is demonizing. I could say my lie.
Well,
my
no,
lie.
it's not demonizing. You got dead people.
What about My Lai massacre? Does that mean that for the rest of history, America is tarnished?
Well, in that way, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not in the way where the rest of the world says we can't do business with you.
Oh, but there's a huge difference, and I'll tell you what it is. The American difference is that we are self-critical as a democracy, and we change our leaders and we try to do better. Can you say the same thing about a dictatorship?
I think, Russia's history is, you've got to understand that you get the politics you deserve based on who you are. And Russia was a peasant society, not even capitalist yet. It started a monarchy, the Tsars, and it brute forced itself into the 20th century through Stalin, and is not even close to being an equal to the US, and never was and never could be. So you're talking about, Turkey. Look at the leadership in Turkey and how bad that is. You get the leadership you deserve based on who you are. And Russia is a relatively poor, failing economy with elites that still run the society, just like Turkey is. Greece was for a while, Portugal was for a while, Spain was until Franco was overthrown. This is not unusual stuff. This is normal stuff.
Well, I think you're making my point, though. I look at the United States and I say, we were a peasant society too. We happened to have a lot of resources and we committed a hell of a genocide. But going back to my original point, if you want to talk about the My Lai massacre, I still remember the lieutenant's name was Robert Calley.
Calley.
And he was tried and convicted of that massacre.
Yeah.
You think the only court the only court that's going to take
you're right.
Russians to
you're right
is a Ukrainian court. They're having war crimes trials now.
Dennis, you're right, and I agree with you 100%. If your point,
Okay, then let's move on.
Which is that Russia is no America.
How about that crypto crash?
Crazy, hey?
Yeah.
I don't understand that at all, not one bit.
Well, I'm teeing up Keith's explanation for it.
If someone give us a little synopsis of what this thing happened, or
Well, there goes Dennis.
No, there's two separate things happening. The one Steve's referring to, I think, is the collapse of Luna and its stablecoin UST from a peak of $300 per Luna down to zero, which where lots of people lost their savings, and apparently there's been some suicides as a result. If I have no evidence that that's true, but I've heard rumors. That's one thing. The second is crypto has had a pullback in general. That's a totally separate thing. Not as dramatic as the stock market's pullback in tech, I will say, but nonetheless still a pullback. So the Luna thing is the one. Now, in order to understand the Luna thing, you have to understand stable coins, and you need to understand that there's two types of stable coin. What is this?
One's unstable and the other one is unstabler.
That's the.
And then there's Kenny Stabler, who's the
there would say.
Hey Keith, can I ask you a quick question? Stablecoin went down 300. Tesla went down 300. Should we put a suicide watch on Elon?
Well, unfortunately, Tesla's still at 800, having gone down, so he's good. But this one went to zero. No, so look, a stable coin is a digital token of $1. So the whole point of a stable coin is it's always worth $1. And
Except when it's not.
so there's two ways that you can achieve that. And it turns out there's only one way, but the world prior to this week believed there were two ways to achieve that. The first way is obvious. You have assets underneath the token that are actually worth $1, usually dollar bills, but it could be gold, it could be anything that is stable. So if you take, there's 4 or 5 stable coins. If you take Tether, which is one, known as USDT, and Circle's USDC, they are both asset backed. So in order for them not to be worth $1, the assets would have to decline. And that hasn't happened. So those stablecoins are still at $1. They weren't impacted at all by this. The one that was impacted is what's called an algorithmic stablecoin. And an algorithmic stablecoin is when the company creates 2 tokens, and the one is meant to provide the assets for the other. In the case of the company Terra, which runs a blockchain called Terra, very similar to Bitcoin's blockchain, but it's its own. Terra minted Luna and UST. And UST was maintained at $1 by the production of Luna tokens.
Now, the problem here is that your explanation is already so confusing that we might as well change the subject.
I'll reduce it down to they had 2 assets, both under their control. The one propped up the other. And when there was a run on their stable tokens, it was attacked basically by external forces trying to reduce its value and succeeded. In order to correct it, they had to print or mint billions of their Luna token, which at the result of reducing a Luna token from $300 down to a cent, as they did that. And so there was a run on the bank, and it turns out that the whole structure was vulnerable. Now, by the way, lots of money was in it because they were offering 20% interest on your dollars for buying it. So lots of savers were putting their money there to get 20% interest. So normal people got hit hard.
I think the 20% number should have been the hint. Just my opinion.
And I'll own up, by the way, I didn't investigate it enough to have an opinion. So I've only learned how it worked afterwards. I didn't know how it worked.
Well, there's been some fine comedy writing on in the newsletter space about this. But what's not funny is the
results.
And the pitch for flipping the switch from Looney Tunes to thank you to Web3, which is what I got from your newsletter this week, Keith. Is basically short term it's bad, and long term it's going to be fantastic.
Well, long term, there's a new financial system being built, which I believe is inevitable, which is a financial system that doesn't involve retail banks, does involve nation states and central banks, and will involve digital wallets and payment mechanisms. And the momentum behind that new financial system is irreversible.
Well, not to disagree with you, because it won't help anyway. This sounds a lot like a rationalization for providing new normal people to lose all their savings in the future. So, I mean,
yeah, but I think we'd have to go
the inevitability of this world that there's an inevitable world that is going to exist. Whether we know what that looks like or not is a question.
Well, here's the good news is this. Ever since Adam Smith and Ricardo, we've all understood in economics that there's a tangible thing called value, and that value is produced by human beings, and it grows. You know, the whole history of the human race is that the value produced by humans grows due to the division of labor and innovation. And so the pot of stuff every year called value gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That is the real worth, if you like, of the human race. What we use to store it and trade it is a variable sitting on top of that. So the mechanisms for storing and trading today cost us about 20% of the value we produce. That's what we pay banks and other institutions as middlemen. So if it was possible to replace that 20% loss that financial services sucks out of the system every year with software and digital storage and spending, that would be a good thing for the entire human race and wouldn't threaten collapse because it's built on top of that actual real value. So I think there's a rational way to think about this that isn't reactive to bad news. So I'm generally an optimist, except for I acknowledge that there'll be all kinds of rocky roads on the way.
So can I ask a question, please? And correct me if I'm wrong, Keith, but in reading what you wrote, did you not imply that this is really no longer decentralized in reality? And if that is the case, doesn't that actually portend, doesn't that say that this is actually not at all what it was everyone thought it was going to be? So that blew up an entire philosophy?
Well, what happened is, well, let's take Luna as an example. Luna was somewhat decentralized because it has things called validators. And validators are not controlled by Terra, the company that started Luna. But these validators vote on things. And when everything went down, they all voted to save Luna and UST. And every decision they made things worse, not better. So it was decentralized, but flawed structurally. That's the problem there. That said, you're right, Frank. Most blockchain is a hybrid between a centralized and a decentralized way of thinking. Very few things are truly decentralized, very few. And that is, of course, a process. The reason they're not is because in order to fully decentralize, you have to build it all around these things called DAOs, distributed autonomous organizations. And DAOs only work if people vote. And it turns out a lot of the time people don't vote. So you end up with decentralized infrastructures with a very small number of voters, which is, of course, the problem with direct democracy.
So this is
people engaged.
I'm sorry, this is gobbledygook to me. And A, and B, the other thing is, of all the people who have been sitting around saying, boy, this is gobbledygook, isn't this absolutely the one thing that is now proven to all of these people that, in fact, it is gobbledygook?
Only in the case of Luna. I mean, if you could imagine,
well, yeah, but from a sort of an optics perspective, the case of Luna has managed to sort of, spread its wings across the entire world of cryptocurrency.
Well, it hasn't
to you, but not to
Well, you mean propagandistically?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think that's true. But that's a misnomer. Basically, the people who are going to make the money in the next 5 years are not reacting due to Luna. They're going the other way.
Yeah.
I wonder.
Well,
I take a little bit of exception to what you're saying about the financial services industry and about how it's changing, and a whole new financial services industry is basically arising and going to disintermediate a whole bunch of what's existing now. But isn't it true that that industry provides a great deal of value, just as we tout the importance of value throughout the economy, and without that industry providing value, I have no doubt that retail transactions would be just fine. But I'm not sure that major transactions that get things done, that float oil tankers and ship grain across oceans and do things like that, build, finance and build major factories and hospitals, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think that happens without a financial services industry. So I'm questioning why you're so optimistic that that's going to go away, and wouldn't that be a bad thing?
So I'll use an example. When I was running the fund in the UK, ADV, or being part of running the fund, we had an investment in a company called Trade Tech. And Trade Tech is former Goldman Sachs bankers who recognized that due to regulations, banks were being forced to keep more cash on their books as a ratio to debt. And that meant that they couldn't do trade guarantees for their customers anymore when they were doing imports and exports. So there were billions and billions of dollars every year that was not being guaranteed because the banks couldn't underwrite it. And so they created an exchange that allowed a bank to bring their customers to the exchange and other people with money to fund the import-export business for what were typically 90-day returns of about 2 or 3%. In the 3 or 4 years since we funded them, billions and billions of dollars of flows that were previously done by banks are now being done through Trade Tech's exchange. And so there's a real trend towards nation states regulating more tightly since 2008 has led to, in the context of world GDP growth, more and more opportunities for finance outside of the old banking system to play a role. And that's just what's happening. And what blockchain represents is a way of accounting for that. It's just an accounting, it's a ledger at the end of the day. But it's a ledger that isn't owned by a bank. It's owned by the network. And it's transparent. So you can see who put stuff in and who took stuff out and what the current state of it is. It's just a tool. And I think the net of all that is that software is eventually going to replace private ledgers. And when it does, transparency will go up. And when it does, costs will come out of the system but not at the cost of not doing the job. Software will do the job better than banks did.
So to me, it's counterintuitive to rule out the strength, if you will, of the entrenched incumbents.
Of course.
I don't hear that in what you're saying. I hear everything but that.
Well, yeah, that's not.
Let me finish what I'm saying.
Sorry.
I don't hear what would be intuitively logical, which would be some humility on the part of people who feel that this vision of the future is well underway and is not going to be impacted by the losses of the current reality. I don't hear that sort of understanding. It's similar to me to the coverage on partisan networks like MSNBC, where they just don't look at what they're talking about, not from the other side's perspective, but from a reasonable centrist perspective that might bring in more people than a partisan perspective. So I don't see the growth that's coming from this crypto future as long as there is a, persistence in explaining, this crash with a future where all those problems will be fixed.
Yeah. Well, look, whenever the future it lives alongside the past, the present represents the fight between the two. So you're quite right. I'm focused on one side of that fight, and I'm not talking about the other side. The other side is the tendency to keep things the way they are. And I think that's very strong. I just put the link in t.me/Gillmor Gang for the Milken Institute Global Conference that happened last week, which, by the way, every senior asset allocator in the world was there. It was very impressive who was there. And the videos for every panel are there, including lots of blockchain related stuff, but lots of asset allocation stuff and banking stuff as well. And it is true that the present is a microcosm and there's no predestined outcome. So when I say I'm optimistic, it doesn't mean I'm right. It just
when you say inevitable, that's not optimistic. That's a statement of apparent fact. And I don't know how you can make that statement while people are going to sleep on grates.
Well, what I said is inevitable is a new financial system. It is inevitable. What isn't inevitable is how much of the past survives and how much of the future takes over. But there's no doubt things aren't going to stay the same, is all I'm really saying. It's inevitable that things are not going to stay the same. And that's because the amount of money being poured in, even this week, by Andreessen and Sequoia and Tiger Global and all of these players, the amount of money being poured into building this new financial system is very, very large, and very significant players are leaving old industries and forming new ones. So the only thing that's inevitable is change. You're quite right that if you interpreted what I said as inevitable as Web3 takes over 100%, no, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that Web3 is clearly real and is going to be part of it.
So in my little tiny brain, I think of one thing that people can point at and say, oh, here's something that I can now use to create something and then sell it and make money. Now I'm talking about NFTs, which also seem to, Dennis, I see you're still there, which also seem to have taken a dive as well. And there's an awful lot of talk about that. And so if I'm, mom and pop out there, first of all, if I'm mom and pop, I probably don't give a shit about NFTs anyway. But that being said, well, that look on your face is the NFT crash, along with the crypto crash, says to me, why do I want to see a change? Sure, we changed from the gold standard to whatever standard we're in now, but why do I want to see this change happen?
I could give you a couple of, I made 2 investments this week in Web3 companies, personal investments. One of them, I can't really talk about them actually, but one of them is in the gifting world. Like when we send a gift to our kids or our siblings or whatever, they're doing digital gifting with zero cost in the middle. And you receive it as a credit card and you can spend it anywhere. And the other one is called the REX protocol for real estate exchange, which is trying to replace mortgages with fractional ownership of residential real estate. So instead
that sounds sketchy.
No, it's fantastic. I
got a reverse mortgage over here. I'm happy to let you take over.
Actually, it's better than a reverse mortgage. That's the whole point of it. So, but really, mortgages are, if you drill down into middlemen, mortgages are one of the most egregious, and with rates going the way they are now. Yeah. So I have $1 million mortgage, as every American who can afford a house that's worth more than $1 million should, because you get tax relief on $1 million, 100% relief on the interest. So it's zero cost. That mortgage I could, instead of having a mortgage, I could have $1 million worth of, tokens for my house. Someone gives me the $1 million, now owns that portion of my house. There's no debt, so I don't pay interest. And when I sell my house, they own that portion of the house. That's the Rex protocol.
I would argue, by the way, that because I have been in that position where I paid cash, that much cash for something, and I felt so much better and didn't care about the tax break because I had a business that was dealing with the tax break.
Yeah. By the way, I just put in the Telegram feed, t.me/Gillmor Gang. I just put Germany, the nation has just announced that you won't get taxed on capital gains on Bitcoin or Ethereum if you hold them for 12 months. That's a major government that is not weird. So the UK previously said it's going to become a test bed for crypto.
Is that a major government that is weird? UK?
Well, they have Boris Johnson.
This guy.
Yeah, I would say yes. You're right,
Yeah.
Steve.
It is.
Okay,
weird.
I'm and scene. Okay, what
Okay.
else? We're running out of time here. Where
I got one. I
well,
got
I
one.
want to hear from
Dennis. I'm
No.
Brent.
yeah, I want to hear from Brent. Anything that is interesting you, you don't have to talk about it. You can just react to it. But
He's lethargic.
Anything in the biomedical industry that's interesting?
What about Buffalo?
Oh, Buffalo, shit, yeah.
yeah, that was
Well, I watched it this morning, and I somehow wasn't tuned into the TV yesterday, so it kind of passed me by. And I watched Meet the Press, and the themes are clearly the extreme right, which this kid was part of, being equated to the cause of this, and Buffalo being a neighborhood he specifically targeted because it was primarily African American, and then Chuck, what's his name, then went and Chuck Todd went and showed in 3 or 4 other major shooting incidents how it was ethnically focused. One was Latino, one was Asian, one was the church, and one was Jewish, and they're building a narrative of the extreme right taking to the streets with guns, which clearly is true. But I think there's also it should shine a light on a second fact, which is, from my point of view here in Palo Alto, America is economically segregated. There are ethnic clusters of poor people who have no hope of escaping except on the fringe. Individuals will, but for the most part, they won't. So we have got to attack the source, which is allowing a society in which ethnic minorities are guaranteed mostly to be poor.
Isn't that what communism is?
Well, sadly, we don't really have the word anymore because it was debased by Soviet Union, that you can't even talk about that. But certainly you can talk about a fair society, equal opportunity, where schools are able to give an education no matter where, that's the same quality, no matter how much money you've got, and stuff like that. And
Socialism.
well, it's not that, that's assuming that the source of it is the government. But a society that doesn't pay for its citizens to be equal isn't really a society.
True.
okay. Does that what you wanted to talk about, Brent?
I mean, it was, one of those every, I don't know how often, 6 months, year, the same thing happens. And, the same response, and then nothing. And then it happens again. And just to relate it back to something somebody said earlier, I can't even remember, but yeah, we still don't own up to this because it keeps repeating itself.
Yeah.
Well, we're not doing anything about guns.
Was it? That's
So
the,
guns are not the actual issue.
Not
It's,
the- Mhm.
yeah, it's
But-
you
but
know,
it-
why
What is
people
the-
buy the guns and shoot them. That's the real issue.
guns don't kill people.
Well, it's symptom and cause, and there are many symptoms. The far right, guns. Most of the narrative is about the symptoms, because it's hard to avoid. Right, when somebody takes a gun and shoots people, it's hard to avoid the symptoms. But they keep repeating, as Brent said. So that means there's some deeper malaise and cause.
Yeah, but often the reaction of certain political parties to these events is to basically reduce it to an issue of education and economics.
A
Or a
mental
bad
health.
apple.
But the effect of transitioning from one discussion to another is to kick the can down the road. So is that a good thing for us to be exploring? Is the issue of endemic racism and economic, whatever the negative phrase would be for it? I mean, it may be, but so far the evidence is not that that's going to contribute to anything that fundamentally changes.
The start of healing is to acknowledge the disease or the pain.
But I understand. But do you understand what I'm saying?
I think I understand what you're saying, but
Okay, so what's the point of broadening the discussion to a point where nothing can happen?
There has been a fundamental change. I would argue that maybe we're not any more racist than we ever have been. It's just that it's more visible than it has been. Coming back from the racism of the 50s, and then how it seemed to have it healed, and now it's back to and or worse than, maybe because it's more open and it's more visible, and it's become okay to be a racist because of the things that you just talked about, Steve.
Well,
So I think there's
it's
I'm sorry?
by political,
Yeah.
political-
I think both things are true. I would strongly argue that we're less racist than we've ever been, ever. And we're less sexist than we've ever been, ever. And we're less homophobic than we've ever been, ever. However, the ability to project sexist, racist, and homophobic points of view is also greater than ever.
Yeah.
So I don't feel as if society has gotten worse. I definitely think it's gotten better. But the ability for mainly minorities, look at the anti-abortion minority now, to own the agenda has gotten greater. So ultimately, that is the theater of ideas playing itself out, sometimes on the street, like we saw. How do we make society truly better? Is the bigger question.
Well, we can't legislate to make society truly better, can we? We can't let the Supreme Court make decisions to make society truly better, can we? What can we do to make society truly better other than vote for a better?
Yeah. No, you're right. The legislature and executive branches of government own accountability for who we are. The judicial system only judges whether the law's been broken. It's the legislative and executive branches. And in November, we can have elections where there's at least a risk that the outcome won't be good, looked at from the point of view of progress, at least. And so in a way, you day to day, to answer Steve's point about what can you actually do now, stand for points of view loudly and openly that suggest, improvement, and ask for things like childcare support for under fives who are not in school, long list, stand for things that will make a difference.
Well,
I think there's something
people are
else.
protesting in the
Hold-
streets
hold
right
on.
now, and I mean, okay, is that going to move the Supreme Court?
No, the Supreme Court.
Hang on a second. I'm trying to get the various voices a little bit more prevalent.
Yeah.
Dennis, you're trying to say something as well.
I think there's something else. The form of government that we have always assumed that people would do the right thing. We wrote a constitution, and James Madison, who wrote most of it, said it's a machine that'll run by itself. All it needs is people to follow it and to not have their own personal axes to grind. What we've seen in the last few years is that people do have an axe to grind, and people can very easily ignore the Constitution. We've seen Donald Trump do that, the other guy, I should say, numerous times, just basically flouting the rule of law. We discovered that there was no Uber layer that said, no, you have to do this. The Uber layer was our super ego. It was the society's belief in its system and society's demand that the system be worked. What we have right now is about half the country that doesn't care about the rule of law, doesn't care about making the system work. And the fundamental problem we have is that, and we're not talking about it. We're not talking about how to make the rule of law more secure.
Well, as long as we keep stuffing the court with people who are going to take political positions instead of legal positions or the right position, I don't know how you're ever going to fix that unless you increase the number of members of the Supreme Court or institute term limits for the Supreme Court. I don't know.
Well, that whole issue corrupted the Senate, which corrupted the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Which is probably causing other corruption. I don't think, I take what you're saying about adding justices and stuff, but I think that really just kicks the can down the road.
You know what? I agree with you. I agree. I actually think term limits is a better idea.
It may very well be, but think about the other thing that is afforded us through the Constitution. Article 3 of the Constitution says that judges and justices will serve on a term of good behavior, meaning it's a lifetime appointment, provided you don't go out and commit an axe murder or something like that. Which means, and that is the same terminology used for a president. Presidents can be impeached. Justices can be impeached. They have been impeached. Do the Democrats, the Republicans aren't going to do it, do the Democrats have the guts to impeach whoever authors a Supreme Court ruling that says, oh, we know better than the last court, so we're going to take away this right that the last court provided? That's nuts. And it should result in somebody in the House of Representatives saying, no, that's an anti-constitutional ruling, and it needs to be examined and defended in an impeachment. That ain't going to happen.
Boy, this certainly took the heat off of Clarence Thomas's wife.
Yeah, put it on Clarence.
didn't it?
Okay, so
Yeah, but doing nothing about it.
last question about this for this show. Does anybody see any pattern of progress in the January 6th committee? And I'll start the answer to that by saying yes.
I think yes also, and I think it was
For what reason?
a bit because of the subpoenas of the 5 congressmen.
And how does that
It-
play
it-
out?
I'm not sure how it plays out, but regardless of
No, but
what
how does-
happens, if they
Why do
say
you think
no,
that
they-
is a good thing? Sorry, go ahead.
if they say no, that they aren't going to come, and then they don't come, that throws another huge black mark on the Republicans, and it's big and it's public and it's open. If they do come and they testify, not unlike TFG's kids, and they openly testify and don't take the 5th, that's a move forward too. So it seems to me that in either way, there's some forward movement. And then of course, we had this conversation last week about whether or not anyone was going to care about the public hearings. I think they will.
I think Frank is right. I agree with Frank and Steve. I think we're in for a long, hot summer. It'll be longer and hotter for the GOP.
Keith, is this a good thing or a bad thing, or just more of the same?
Well, from the point of view of history and the facts, it's a great thing. You want history to show what happened and make people accountable, and probably that will happen legally as well at some point. I do think it would be a massive mistake for the Democrats to use this as their primary focus leading up to November rather than the abortion debate. I think the abortion debate is a winning debate that will win them lots of seats. And I think this is a look back that will, make them feel good in terms of the record, but won't actually result in them winning any elections.
Yeah. I think you're right, but I don't think that was Steve's point.
Well, I haven't made my point, but I will now. As far as I'm concerned, the dialogue between what is his name? Raskin?
Jamie Raskin.
Yeah, Jamie
Jamie.
Raskin and Liz Cheney. It started as a kind of science experiment, which was, how long before Liz Cheney was basically primaried out. We're not hearing that right now. What we're hearing is that Trump's impact on race's endorsement is competing with the turmoil in the Republican Party about the range of support for Trump's insurrection. And as a result, there's going to be some impact, I think, in the fall of the results of what happens when the Trump candidates that he squeaks through with coming up against the general population.
And losing the general election.
But just because, they're a fraction of a fractional party. So it's there that I see the intersection between the abortion rights debate and January 6th, which is, okay, you've got the evidence. Does anybody care? No. Do they care about women's rights? Do they care about a whole range of things that are going to sure as hell come next? Is that enough to get you guys out to vote?
Did you see? Sorry, go ahead, Tina.
I just think that if this subject gets framed as abortion rights in the election, it's actually a losing topic. If it gets framed as women's rights, I think it has much more legs. If it is about women's health, it is about women's rights. I mean, we're half the population. Everyone knows a woman. Not everyone knows or thinks they know someone who has or needs an abortion. So I think it has to be kept on, this like downgrading women as being less capable of making decisions about their own bodies.
Do you think women are going to
than
vote?
It is about abortion.
Do you think women are going to vote?
Well, of course, women are going.
Are they going to come out and vote?
Yes, but I certainly don't think that all women are for abortion.
No,
rights.
I understand that point, but I'm asking you.
That's why I think
Is-
it has to be framed more about women's rights.
So, yeah, I
agree.
agree. I think that's subtle but important, which is a woman's right to choose isn't pro-abortion. It's not, nobody is, pro-abortion, as in abortion is a good thing. Everybody is pro a woman's right to choose, which is where the abortion is not the
Foregone conclusion.
universal outcome that you're looking for with all women. What you're looking for with all women is the right to choose. And now there's no avoiding the fact that involves being in favor of a specific abortion. And there are rules around that. So I don't think there's a way to soften the blow of the fact that you actually are for, in that case, an abortion. But Tina's right. If you frame it as pro-abortion, it's what much, and I did do that as a shorthand earlier, so I'm to blame.
I think a lot of people are framing it that way, and I don't think that that's.
Well, I used the frame of abortion rights as a way of softening being about abortion.
Yeah.
And obviously it didn't work. That's why I said it that way.
Did you see the?
Hang on, please.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Just real quick point. I think these are elements of a good strategy, but I think the strategy is even broader. The strategy of this election has to be, I think, a no confidence vote in the GOP. There's too much that the GOP has done badly to the American people. They must be held accountable. And some people will be against Roe v. Wade. That's okay. But earlier I was talking about how we need to get back to supporting the rule of law. And I think the way you do that in 2022 is to have a no confidence vote in the GOP.
Did you see that's a good segue. I think she's an African-American Republican candidate in Pennsylvania today said, this sentence was, men holding hands, men caressing, men whatever, that's not normal. And she focused in on gay rights, basically, as not normal. And she's apparently doing quite well in the primaries there. And so it feels to me as if it's what I said last week, the Democrat holding the GOP accountable, the canvas on which you do it needs to be all about human rights.
It has to be the broadest canvas you can make.
Yeah, but it shouldn't be about inflation. It shouldn't be about Russia and Ukraine. It shouldn't be about the economy, because those are not a winning part of the canvas.
Well, I know I tend to disagree a little bit with you there, because there are things that the Republicans have done in terms of voting. For example, those Republicans who voted against aid to the Ukraine. Now that was egregious, in my opinion, and that's one small thing, but it should be part of the whole tapestry that Dennis is talking about, I think.
And what I was talking about to start this segment was an intuition that what the January 6th committee is doing is triangulating some facts in this situation, and that they are not hampered by the rules and regulations of the Mueller report, which was basically at the pleasure of the current attorney general, and not destined to be in any way transparent. These people are, Raskin and Madeline Dean, I believe, is her name, from Pennsylvania. These people are going on television and saying, with no counter indication from the Republican Party, that illegal acts have not only were made, but they're currently being made. And I think that the thrust of what is going on in terms of a continued effort that's going on in real time to subvert the election process is an illegal act and is punishable by law if, in fact, there is a law.
That's kind of what I am hoping to get from the public hearings, is stuff like that we're not hearing a lot about. That they've got facts and they've got figures and they've got data and they've got receipts that we haven't heard a lot about.
Yeah,
that,
for example, I agree with you. The subpoenas for the congressman are all backed up by testimony that they already have,
right,
and documents. So basically, what does this pseudo Speaker of the House future say to the fact that what he said about what he said, he didn't say it, and then they play the tape, and then he says, well, it's a rigged process.
It actually makes you respect Mike Pence a little bit, because if you can imagine the pressure he was under, there clearly was, a coup agenda that he was the core of. And had he played his role, more serious things would have unraveled. And probably everyone in his circle was encouraging him to play that role, and he didn't.
Not everyone in his circle, but some.
Yeah.
Brent's got to go. Brenda's waving off. Yes, Dennis is waving.
All right.
chow mein, Brent.
Let's use this as a wrap point. I want to thank Brent Leary. Thanks, Brent. I want to thank Dennis Pombriant,
Always a pleasure. Thanks.
Frank Radis.
Thanks. That's it. I got nothing else.
Yeah, no, dead air is our friend. And Keith here.
Yeah, I just apologize for how much I spoke. I wish if Michael was here, I would have spoken half as much.
Well, it was inevitable. So what can we do?
I'd like to alert everybody to the lunar eclipse tonight, starting at 10:27 Eastern.
Only
time.
visible in about 30% of California.
I know it's not going to be because
and I want to hip everybody to watch the new series by Michael Connolly on the
Bosch, the rerun.
Bosch the rerun is very good, but this is also really good. It's the Lincoln Lawyer. It's really worth watching.
Good.
We were thinking about
that. Yeah, we've been watching Bosch too.
It's good.
Stanley Tucci in Italy, CNN Series 2.
Yeah, that's good too.
Yeah.
I want to thank Tina Chase Gillmor, our producer and director.
Thank you. All right.
And I want to thank and hope that all things go well for Michael Markman and family.
Like it's going well.
Good.
Yeah.
And I guess that's it. Thanks to everybody who showed up, and especially those who didn't. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Have a good week.